Okay. So I'm Rick Longinotti. I'm the co-chair of the Campaign for Sustainable Transportation, and we're one of the groups that is putting together this ballot initiative. I want to share my screen with you so that you can see kind of what we're up to. So it would be on the ballot, and if we get enough signatures, that is in November 2022. First of all, the elements of the ballot measure, it designates certain parcels downtown that are currently city parking lots. It requires that they be developed with permanently affordable housing. Keep the ground floor parking if needed in those areas. And we've gone over the numbers, we figure about 350 potential affordable units. Secondly, that would prioritize the farmers market at its current location. It specifically does not preclude the development of affordable housing on that spot as well. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. But I thought this was a really important piece of the Santa Cruz downtown plan that says open spaces within downtown should have value and meaning. They should be carefully located where people want to be, and in locations that take advantage of the unique resources, heritage, and traditions of the community. So in other words, they shouldn't be located in random places. An important piece of this ballot measure is that if a garage is not built, there will be a considerable savings for the life of the bond measure that the garage would require. That's a 30-year bond. So that savings is designated as a priority for affordable housing development, as supplementing Measure S for the renovation of the downtown library, improvements to the farmers market lot, and also to continue the benefits that commuters have to reduce parking demand. Right now downtown, if you work downtown, you can get a bus pass, and there are other benefits. So the city's current Lot 4 plan is depicted in this drawing at one point along the line the city produces. It involves a 6-level parking structure, a ground floor library, affordable housing, which is limited by the amount of space devoted to parking. It would require the farmers market to move to an inferior location. And of course, the trees are at risk, and it would put downtown business owners at risk. Right now, the city is phasing out the what they call the deficiency fee that's imposed on downtown business owners who do not provide their own parking. And one could imagine a scenario if the debt on the downtown parking district needed to be paid and the revenue wasn't sufficient, that the city might reinstitute those fees. There is potential on Lot 7, which is on Front Street at corner of Cathcart's behind the Del Mar Theater, along through there. Students at USF took a look at this lot, and they proposed a 6-story building of 120 units. If it were 7 stories, that's another 24 units. This is the city's design for what would go on that lot, Lot 7 on Front Street, which is a structure that would be used by the farmers market during, well, all times of year, but it would protect them in inclement weather. So as you can see, this permanent structure would preclude the development of affordable housing on that lot. The city project, right now, the proposal is for 400 parking spaces. And, there's a loss of opportunity here because space is at a premium downtown, and the space required to park 2 cars, when you count circulation space, is the equivalent of a 2-bedroom housing unit. The surplus parking revenue, right now the city does not have a regular funding source for affordable housing, like an annual revenue source. And so this would be really important for that. It's also prioritized for the renovation of the library. This is a photo or a drawing that Jason Architecture did of a renovated downtown library. and really importantly, from the point of view of sustainable transportation, there'd be no unnecessary parking. So the city did contract with Nelson Nygaard to produce this report. The contract started in May of 2016. The city council never saw this report. So the city council has been making decisions about putting a new parking structure in without the benefit of seeing this report. The report did recommend alternatives to building a new parking structure. And this is an important statement because it's talking about the most important of their recommendations. The most fiscally prudent approach to accommodating additional demand is to modernize parking management and better align parking prices to the cost of building and maintaining the system. So what we see, this was a photo that I took on graduation weekend, which is one of those weekends where the downtown is busy in the evenings, right? After people finish their graduation ceremonies, and they go out with their graduates to dinner. The Nelson Nygaard report, they looked at the city's log of their actual census of parking occupancy, and they found that during the peak of the peak times, the 30% of, almost 30% of off-street parking remained empty. This is a graph put together by Patrick Siegman, who worked for Nelson Nygaard. He noticed that from the same set of data supplied by the city, that parking occupancy reached its peak in 2008 and has declined since then. I just wanted to compare with Boulder, Colorado. You see, Boulder has a very thriving downtown. You see the street there, which is actually a pedestrian mall. They had closed off their main street section of it, and they have a thriving downtown. They don't plan to build any new parking structures, and they have much less parking spaces per square foot than Santa Cruz. They have about 1 parking space per square foot, and Santa Cruz has 1.8. And this is reflected, or the Boulder is actually got a much better mode split. They call this. These are the people who come to work in the downtown of Boulder. 43% drive alone, compared to Santa Cruz, 58%. If you notice, Boulder, they have a much higher rate of riding a bus to downtown, and they even have a higher rate of bicycling to downtown, 11% versus Santa Cruz, 9%. Boulder transit use is up since 1990. Santa Cruz Metro transit went down roughly in the same period of time, and this is no accident. Boulder decided to not, instead of cutting back in service, which Metro did, Boulder invested in its transit. They created these lines with fun names and a marketing effort to get people to see that riding the bus was cool, but more importantly, it could get them to where they wanted to go in a reasonable amount of time. Boulder has said in their evaluation of their transportation, the city's strongest transportation demand management tool is the EcoPass. We have that now in Santa Cruz as a result of a vote by the city council. It was a 4-3 vote, so a very slim majority, but right now bus passes are available to anybody who works downtown. There's a question that has come up at city meetings. This is a slide from one of the city presentations. The thought that we need a new parking garage to replace parking spaces that will be lost to development. And in this lot, there was estimated 222 spaces. That's 7.5% of the total of the city operated spaces downtown. But what that information did not take into account was that some of these new projects, this is the one that's being built right now on the corner of Laurel Street, Pacific and Front. There'll be a net gain of 20 parking spaces because they're available to the public. The consultant Patrick Siegman, who worked on the Nelson Nygaard study, he came to the city council in March of 2019, and he addressed this very problem. And it's important for me to read this quote. He said, what we see from the model, this is a model of future parking demand, is that the city council approved price increases will reduce demand enough so that even with new development and the loss of some surface parking spaces, you'll still have a surplus. So in other words, Siegmund said that, when prices go up, when the city doubled the parking prices across the board in 2018, garage prices went from $5 to $10 a day. The monthly permit fees went from around $40 up to $75. That will go into effect next year, the higher rate. And meters also went up. So when that happens, people make different choices, especially commuters. Commuters are most sensitive to price increases if they have other options, right? If they can carpool, if they can walk to work or ride a bus. There are about half of the people that work downtown who live within 3 miles of downtown. And those are the people that are most likely to switch modes. So we can look at our choices as this. We, relocate the farmer's market to less desirable. We got to build a garage instead of doing better things with that money. We end up housing more cars than people on the lot 4 on Cedar Street, and we put downtown business owners at risk for a 30-year debt. But we don't have to do this because we have a win-win-win where the farmer's market gets to stay in its popular location. We can have more housing on Front Street and elsewhere in the city parking lots. And we get a beautiful library that satisfies the needs of the community. Before I ask for questions, there are a couple of questions that have just, that have come up that I anticipate that I'll be getting. So I just want to cover them first. So just about the comparison of affordable units. So on the left, you see lot 4. The city's proposal is according to their consultant right now, 95 units if it's 6 stories, 107 units if it's 7 stories. I'm not going to go into whether or not, there's a 50-foot height limit on most of lot 4. Not clear how they're going to get past that, but there are some loopholes now that can be taken advantage, or not loopholes, I should say, but some exemptions if it's affordable housing. So potentially, I guess they could go to 7 stories. On lot 7, which actually is already zoned for that height of building, you could have lots more units for the on that site. I mentioned that affordable housing. Well, I mentioned that in a minute. Then there's these other lots that are in our measure that are designated for affordable housing. That's lot 8, which is across the street from the farmer's market lot. There's lot 14 down by the library, and then there's some other lots by the police station. And so a total, potentially of almost 350 units with all these other lots being developed. So, this is I mentioned this, that the affordable housing project could share the site with the farmers market plaza. That's not the intention of our ballot initiative, but it certainly allows that. We did not preclude the development of affordable housing on lot 4, and we said that right in the measure. I bring this up because, I presented this very drawing to the city manager, to the library director, to the Friends of the Library. And I brought it to them at a time when we were discussing, what's the win-win here, where even though the library could locate on a portion of this farmer's market lot,
you can move those papers
and go 2 stories and then have affordable housing above that. That there was no interest in negotiating that with our group or the other groups that were concerned about this project. So there it is. So there's the other question is, maybe this is a good idea, to develop these other city lots, and maybe more units could be built on these other city lots. But we have a project that's already being planned, and this is the bird in the hand argument, right? That this project could be completed soon. actually that's not the case. The city's project isn't a bird in the hand. There are many obstacles to getting this project underway. And the principal ones are the financial obstacles, which were called out by a city consultant when it was proposed before the city council in 2018. It says the model does not evaluate a worst case scenario for parking revenues where a major recession occurs or a technological change in pricing substantially reduces parking demand. So we've had one of those, right? We've had a worst case scenario. We've had, this is a graph, and I know it's hard to look at graphs, but I'm going to just take it slowly here. This is a graph of the Parking Enterprise Fund revenue and expenses. So the revenues in the blue line and the expenses are in the red line. And then the green line down below shows the revenue minus expense, right? And so if you start in the year 2013 on the left, you see that, pretty much the parking district was in the black for a number of years. They had more revenue than expenses. They dipped in 2018. They started to go up at the beginning of 2019, and that's when those parking revenue increases that the city council passed went into effect. But then we had the pandemic, and then it's back into the red. So now it's almost $4 million in the red as of the last fiscal year. So in order to finance a garage, according to the 2018 report to the city council, it would take $2.9 million a year in debt service alone, right? So on this graph, you're going to have to see not only the revenue expense being equal or in the black, you're going to have to see a surplus of $2.9 million before there really could be any credibility to the idea that you could pay off a bond debt. Now, you have bond rating agencies that, when you go to, when a city goes to issue bonds, there are bond ratings, and you cannot get a good rating if you don't have any way to pay the bond back, right? So there's really an open question: when will the city be in the black, and when will it have a surplus? And that question, it may never have that kind of surplus, $2.9 million. And here's why. There's a decline in parking demand that's a national phenomenon. In San Francisco, Union Square, if you've ever been there, it's right in the heart of downtown, the major tourist spot in all of, maybe all of San Francisco. Because of declining revenue there, the revenue there, excess revenue goes to the Park and Rec department. And so the Park and Rec department has been in trouble. This is a 2017 article. They've been in trouble for a number of years because of declining parking revenue. But that's not all. I mean, all across the country, you have a trend where Uber and Lyft are cutting into parking in the downtown. So restaurants and bars and hotels and so forth are experiencing this decline. There are other financial obstacles. The library funding is at least $5 million short, and that's for a smaller place than they had hoped to get 44,000 square feet. And this is not even for that big a space. And also, of course, housing funding takes time to put in place. We have a metro project that may start soon. At least it's in the approval process, but that's been in the works for about 6 years. Then there are the environmental obstacles, and according to the California Environmental Quality Act, an EIR, environmental impact report, has got to consider environmentally superior alternative. And the issue here is that you have alternatives that have been pointed out to the city already. These are going to wind up in the EIR. And the EIR, if it's an honest EIR, is going to say, look, you have all these consultants, and these are consultants who spoke to the city, right? Frederick Venter, Ria Hudabar-Low, and Janice Rhodes came to the Planning Commission in 2015, and this is what they said to them. Patrick Siegman and Adam Miller-Ball spoke at the City Council on March 2019. So all this is input into the environmental impact report, and if it's honest, it's going to say, well, the city was offered alternatives and they didn't take them. So here's my conclusion, is that the project is tenuous. Just a little bit of history. So this came up, this idea, this was the illustration that came up before the city council in 2016. The Nelson Nygaard report was at that time in the works, but the city staff decided not to wait for the results. They instead proposed a 640 space parking garage. And the library would become a tenant in the building. The city would not charge the library for being a tenant. And their parking revenues would pay for components of the building, and this wasn't spelled out at the time. And the library would get to pay for tenant improvements. September 2018, as I mentioned, the city council voted to continue planning for the garage, the library, and an undetermined amount of housing. And then in June 2020, the number of parking spaces dropped to 400, and that was in order to fit at least 50 units of affordable housing. So that was the last time that the city council has weighed in on this. So we're going to stop my sharing. And I want to ask folks if the members of the press that are here would raise your hand first, so we get their questions first, and then I'll take questions from everybody else.
Hi, Rick.
Hi, Steve.
Here. I guess I'm a member of the press, even though I'm not a reporter.
Yeah, I'm not hearing you really well, so can you speak up?
Okay. I just have a kind of a logistical question about the initiative. You know how many volunteers you have to collect signatures, and approximately when that will begin?
Yeah, so we're still waiting on the city attorney's description of our ballot measure, the title and summary, which and that's due on Tuesday. That legally he's required to give us that description by Tuesday. Once we have that, then we can print petitions, right? So maybe by the end of next week, we'll be ready to roll on printing petitions. We have a kickoff tomorrow at 1 o'clock at Lot 4, and a celebration, a kickoff celebration. And how many people we've got? Well, we don't know exactly how many people we have. There's probably about 20 people in a sort of a core team that have gotten us to this far. But we expect many, many more people. When I worked on the ballot initiative in 2012 for the right to vote on desalination, people came out of the woodwork to help with gathering signatures. So we're pretty confident. We've got 6 months to gather signatures, and we're very confident about getting the signatures.
Thank you.
Yeah. And would folks mind putting your hand up if you have a question? And that makes it easier for me to see, because not everybody's on my screen right now, so I can't see. But if you raise your hand, do you notice at the bottom, the toolbar, it says reactions. There's a raise your hand feature down there.
There's a question in the chat too, Rick, from Ron Pomerantz.
Oh, would you mind reading that for me?
That'd be fine. Why did parking revenues increase by nearly $2 million in the past 2 years? Want me to repeat it? Why did?
Yeah. No, I think I got it. Why did they increase? Well, so the parking increases that the city council voted on went into effect starting January 1st of 2019. So that was where the bump in the revenue started to happen.
Here's one from Emily Ham. Under current city guidelines, funds received from parking lots and parking structures in the downtown parking district are utilized for parking and transportation maintenance and improvements. As written, this initiative would not allow any city-owned property to be used for 2 or more stories for parking. Is there no plan to move forward with if there is no plan to move forward with the garage, then shouldn't parking rates be lowered for downtown employees, customers, and residents? That's in the chat.
Okay, so according to the city attorney who advised the city council on March 19th, 2019, parking revenue that's in excess of the amount of revenue that's necessary for supplying parking in the downtown is available to be moved into the general fund. And that's a legal opinion from our city attorney, but it's also a practice in many other communities. Old Pasadena uses their parking revenue they used it to upgrade the street and to, beautify their street. In Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, they use parking revenue to pay for police patrols in the evening times. There's many other examples. Austin, Texas, where it's used, for transportation demand management for rewards for commuter benefits. So the parking revenue is unlike water revenue or unlike revenue to the sewage charge. Those are subject to state law that prohibits the revenues from things like water to be used for any other purpose, right? But parking revenue is not like that. So there is an exemption. Now, the second part of Emily's question was, should that, if we're not going to use parking revenue for parking, should we return it to, should we lower parking rates? Well, that's a matter of choice, right? We could reduce parking rates, or we could decide to spend that revenue for something good. And that's what this initiative is about. And I see that Matt Nathanson has your hand up. Matt?
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand a couple parts of this. So one is, as I read the initiative, there's this idea that excess revenue could be funneled towards a stream to develop affordable housing. But I guess what I'm trying to understand is the proposal that the city's moving forward with to build the garage with affordable housing and the library, that's sort of multi-use building, whatever you want to call that, depends on that the way that the money for that comes from a bond measure. From the bond. Now I'm assuming that if this proposal goes through, then the bond doesn't happen. Or are you proposing that there'd be a different bond for affordable housing there? I guess I'm trying to understand how this actually really creates funding for affordable housing. So maybe if you could answer that.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. So the premise of the funding for affordable housing and renovation of the library and improvements to the farmers market lot is that a garage will not be built, right? So that $2.9 million, almost $3 million a year that the city would have spent on debt service would be available. Now, we don't think it's going to be $3 million a year. We think the city really overestimated the amount of parking revenue they're going to be able to generate. And we're in the hole now, right? The parking district is way in the hole. So we're estimating maybe $1.5 million per year that would be available for affordable housing. So the first part of your question was about kind of that, like how the city proposes to fund the mixed use project. There's really three revenue sources. And one is the library's Measure S, which was passed in 2016, which put it was a property tax. So the library is able to issue bonds that will be repaid by that property tax over a period of time. The parking would also be bonds because there's not any money in the parking fund right now. So they would have to issue bonds to build the garage. And that's the problem, that they would, they don't have the revenue stream to show that they could repay the bonds. And then the third part would be affordable housing funding, and that comes from many, many sources, right? And it has to be all arranged and put together. Does that answer your question?
In part, yeah. I mean, so it's not actually creating a new revenue stream for affordable housing. I do hear what you're saying is that we're not spending money we might have otherwise spent. Although, I guess what I'm confused is I'm not advocating for more parking. It seems to me if there were more parking spaces, maybe the theory was that created more parking revenue. and maybe that was part of it. And then I guess the other thing that I wonder about is, and maybe I'm wrong on this, when the Measure S, I believe it was, for the library was passed, I thought there was kind of a time limit on when they had to use that money. And so part of my concern is, this ongoing debate about where do you do the library? Do you do it at the old site? Do you do it at this new site? My fear is that we get sort of locked in in a gridlock, and that we don't spend that money and we don't get a new library at either location. And so maybe I'm wrong. If somebody can speak to, is there a deadline on when those funds have to be used by? Because that's a concern this raises for me. I feel like the library almost has gotten held hostage to the city's idea that we can build a bigger library cheaper by tying it to this other project.
Yeah, I'm going to ask John to answer that question about the Measure S funding and how that works. John Hall, are you
Yeah,
available?
sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah,
So the Measure S funding does have not a hard deadline, but the cost of financing the bonds obviously increases as the time is expended before spending the money. All the other branches that are in the system that were provided funds out of Measure S have already started their projects. So this one is slow. The Jason architecture proposal for renovation of the library at its existing site is easily now available to be turned into construction drawings, and it would be quite possible, in fact, I think more likely, if this measure that we're proposing is passed, to start construction on renovating the library, then it would be to start on the so-called mixed-use project on Lot 4. So as Rick pointed out, the Pacific Station South project was 6 years in the making, and we still haven't seen any dirt turned over. And there have been other projects that were not nearly as complex as the Lot 4 project that have taken as much as 10 years. So I agree with you, Nathan. Time is of the essence, and I think we'll get this resolved by November 2022, but in my mind, it would be a great thing if the city council would just go ahead and say, yes, this does make sense. It makes more sense than the complicated project that we're proposing, because we can begin with it now, and we can similarly begin with affordable housing on Lot 7 rather than leaving it to the vagaries of the Lot 4 process with the funding for the parking garage bonds and the library shortfall and so forth.
Thank you.
hey, Bob, are you monitoring the chat still?
Yeah, I'm taking a look. I just responded to Ms. Ham. Is that Emily? Yeah, I responded to her, but let me, she's asking some longer questions, Rick.
Great.
Let's see, Jacqueline. So Emily's question talks about, if I can read it, virtually every professional transportation or parking planner will say that parking districts with shared facilities for multiple users are the most cost-effective and environmentally good strategy for multi-use districts, especially when backed by a well-funded and promoted program of other transportation options. Isn't this exactly what the current plan for the mixed-use library project adjacent to a shared parking structure with affordable housing units does?
Yeah, well, I don't know if Emily, if you were able to see my entire presentation, but I addressed that in the presentation. I agree with you that it can be a strategy for more efficient use of precious and valuable property to consolidate parking in a parking structure, if that would allow other properties to be freed up for development. The obvious issue here is that when we already have a surfeit of parking, that even at the peak of the peak times, we have almost 30% of our off-street parking vacant, right? that it makes no sense to build more parking to satisfy this ability to develop surface parking lots. We have that ability right now without building a single new parking space. And I mentioned in the presentation that we have 1.8 parking spaces per million square, or what was that again? we have 80% more parking spaces per square foot of commercial space than the city of Boulder, right? We should be looking to these cities like Boulder, who are doing things better than us, frankly, for how they are able to pull that off.
She has a follow-up question, Rick. Also, the legal opinion by the city attorney was never followed up by the city council. So staff was directed to ensure users of the parking get what they pay for. And I'm assuming she means a legal opinion about sharing.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any city council decision that told staff to tell parking, to reduce parking rates for users. That has not come. I would know that, and that has not happened.
Lastly, she has a follow-up, if I may. She says also, we haven't returned entirely to in-person work. How are we supposed to accurately assess parking demand?
Exactly. Why would we decide to build a 400 space parking structure when we have no idea actually of what and when parking demand will be, even 4 years from now?
Judy has asked, how does inviting more cars downtown and removing heritage trees fit with the city's climate action plan?
Well, I think that was a softball pitch. The city's climate action plan that was established, I think 2013, adopted in 2013, it called for like a 10% reduction in driving in the city, within the city limits. And we certainly didn't achieve that. We went up. I mean, you don't achieve that without investing, right? It has to be a priority of the city to invest in making it easy and safe, absolutely safe for people to get around without getting in their car. So that's not been a city priority. When the city Transportation Commission wanted to establish Vision Zero, which was about zero serious injuries in traffic collisions, this public works staff opposed it. So we have a task before us, which is to reorder our priorities in our city.
Let's see. Can I follow up again with a question from Emily?
Well, is there anybody else?
No
Right,
one.
go with Emily.
Okay. Rick, with your recently changed language, you seem to allow housing on lot 4, but only if the farmer's market and the trees are preserved. How could a viable housing project be built on that site when those two requirements are so limiting?
Well, first of all, I mean, we've identified, a bunch of other sites that would accommodate a lot of housing, right? 350 units of housing, that's a lot. If it were me personally, I would do those first, right? And then potentially consider developing housing, if there's a way to be in harmony with the farmer's market. But that's not my decision. It's not in our initiative. We're simply saying in our initiative does not preclude affordable housing on lot 4. So that would be up to the city council. And I would guess that they would try to work it out with the farmer's market. How much space does the market need, right?
No other questions.
Jacqueline
Jacqueline has her hand up.
okay. Doesn't the city's plan leave the city vulnerable financially when we already know that there will be the need for help as sea levels rise, particularly during storm surges and high tides, long before the life of this building. Plus, even the downtown, I like in your plan that you don't have people living on the ground floor, that you only have cars which can be moved, let alone books and libraries.
I agree with you, Jackie. Yeah. I want to take a moment to share my screen again, and we'll have a little more time right at the end. We're gonna quit right at 1 o'clock. And I just want to share a slideshow I put together a couple of years ago before the pandemic, when I had touch with people who worked downtown, business owners downtown, and what they had to say about a new garage. You know, it was pretty consistent. You know, it's like, hey, we should manage our current parking situation before we make a commitment. Exactly. And that's exactly what the consultants, all 5 of them, told the city. Unfortunately, the word didn't get to the city council. Yeah, it flies in the face of what we know about climate change. It seems the obvious solution is to reduce demand for employee parking downtown. Kurt Simmons. Yeah, let's do something about our homeless problem, according to Nicole. How about that? That's more of an issue really for downtown businesses than parking. Here's Paul, who has a vision for more pedestrian, cyclists, and transportation options. Yeah, farmers market space is really a prized feature for Janice. Financial risk for downtown businesses. Yeah, if the debt needs to be paid, then who's going to pay it, right? Paul Cocking. After 25 years downtown, I've heard very few complaints about parking. Santa Cruz needs more homeless services, affordable apartments, and event space, and more events. I'm not happy about moving our popular farmers market to an inferior location. Paul's a every week patron of the farmers market. Ashley, we need to restructure the parking permit program. So permit holders pay by the day rather than by the month. That's a great idea. It was actually in the recommendations from Nelson Nygaard. Yeah, Wade is noticing that a moment of history that we're at, technological crossroads, Lyft and Uber, so many new transportation concepts here and on the near horizon. It doesn't make sense to choose the garage as the only path forward. And the Leslie and Michael Tierra, beloved acupuncturists and herbologists. Yeah, lowering our negative environmental impact. How about that? This is, yeah, folks who own Lupolo, creating more congestion, manage our existing parking, focus on bike-friendly streets, and so on. Not all these people are in business anymore, actually, from the pandemic. Do we have any more questions? So I'll read from the chat from Chris Crone. Rick, the Our Downtown, Our Future initiative has a lot going on. There seem to be 5 components to it. Is it too complicated? How do you expect voters to grasp the entirety of this ballot measure? Well, good question. You know, we've talked to hundreds of voters already in the last few years, mainly at the farmers market. People get it. You know, they don't have to be, you know, there's not a lot of doubt. I mean, you know, people don't want a garage to go into the downtown that would force the relocation of the farmers market. That's very clear. They like it there. They like the farmers market there. A lot of people like the library where it is. You know, there's a whole lot of people who felt like there was kind of a fast one pulled on them when they voted for Measure S. You know, there were tons of people who voted for Measure S who didn't want the library put as a tenant in a parking garage. So we know that the public opinion is very much on the side of what we're trying to do in this ballot measure. And it's like people are saying, at last, that's what we've discovered so far. At last, we're going to actually have our voices heard in a way that the council, at least the council majority, there's been a very vocal minority who have not supported this project. But we'll have our voices heard. Let's see.
Emily's question, isn't the city working with the farmers market to ensure that they have a permanent location?
Yeah, John, do you want to answer that question?
Sure. The farmers market, most of all, according to the people who are on the board and to Nesh Dillon, who's the executive director, want permanence. They have variously been told by the city that, oh, we would put you on lot 7, the structure that Rick showed the image of, or possibly that they would be put where the present library is after the library structure is demolished. And then there's the possibility of them remaining on lot 4. So the city's negotiations with, I can't speak for the farmers market people, but I know that they have ongoing discussions, and I know that those discussions are not resolved. And if our measure gets on the ballot and passes, then it will provide a clear way forward for the location of the farmers market where it is, saving the trees. And I think that I know that at least some people on the farmers market who both work there and have booths there and are on the board favor the location where it presently is. And I know that the vast majority of people who patronize the market favor it where it is.
Ron has submitted another question, Rick. If the parking lot is built on lot 4 and the parking enterprise fund can't pay the amortized amount, will the city general fund be obligated?
Yeah, in the end, the city is on the hook for payment of bond debt. But what I imagine the city would do is raise parking rates before that happens. And as we've learned, every time you raise parking rates, you dampen down demand for parking. So there could be a kind of vicious circle here where parking rates get raised, fewer people park downtown, which may be a good thing for the environment, but not such a good thing for the revenue picture, right? So I think that puts downtown business owners at risk of actually reinstituting that parking deficiency fee, which is being sunsetted right now, but also at risk because how high can you raise parking rates before it starts to cut into business? It's amazing to me how an idea that would never fly in the private sector can get so far just because it's city government and someone wanted a library that was a beautiful new library. Okay, that's a grand vision, but deciding to build a parking structure to make that happen would never fly in the private sector. You'd be laughed at because there's not a way to pay for it. Just to give you an idea of how financially difficult it is the city raised rates for people who have monthly permits downtown, right? People who work downtown to $75 a month. It used to be $40 a month. The cost to build a new space in this parking garage is around $400 a month, just in debt service alone, not counting maintenance or other administration. So we'd be buying new spaces at $400 a month and then charging people $75 a month to use them. That's what I mean. It would never fly in the private sector. If you were a restaurant owner and you could, add another, 600 square feet to your restaurant by remodeling, but you figured out that you wouldn't pay for it because the number of tables you could fit in there would not pay for it, well, then you wouldn't do it.
Rick, I think I'd like to read another question from Emily. And this came up in Santa Cruz for Bernie when I presented to them. And I think it's important for us to respond to this. Nesh was cited in a Lookout article. He's the GM of the farmers market, was cited in a Lookout article saying that your group hasn't reached out to the farmers market and that they are not partial to a particular location as long as it's permanent. She says, I'm confused.
Yeah, and John may have something to say about this too. I think when Nesh was saying that he had never heard of our Downtown, Our Future, which is a brand new organization. So of course he'd never heard about it. But John and other people have been in frequent contact with Nesh and also the board of the farmers market over the years.
I would just add exactly. I talked with Nesh very soon after that article appeared, and that's it exactly, that he had not heard of our Downtown, Our Future, because the group hadn't even been officially launched yet.
This is Elizabeth.
He and I,
I'm fine.
he and I, as in my role in relation to Downtown Commons advocates, had spoken often and continue to speak frequently about the farmers market. And you're quite right. What he did say in that interview that he really meant and continues to mean is that the farmers market seeks permanence. I think beyond that, and I don't want to speak for Nesh, but he has a lot of great ideas about how to make a farmers market not only permanent, but how to have additional kinds of services and facilities and training programs and opportunities for wholesale marketing and so forth. So the development of the farmers market is really a crucial element of our downtown planning, and our Downtown, Our Future, I think, has a really interesting set of possibilities for it to move forward as a central institution of downtown Santa Cruz. We really think that downtown Santa Cruz needs an economic revitalization, and that having public space and having a vibrant farmers market at its present location are the way forward. So thanks for the question, Emily.
I see, thanks, John. I see a question from Zach Davis. Zach, if you don't mind, I'll read it. I'm a bit lost about what this initiative does that's helpful for our downtown. As a downtown business owner, farmers market vendor, and father of 3 grade school kids, I think I recognize that time is of the essence. People need affordable housing now. Kids need a modern library built in the way that gets the most value for the money now. All this measure seems to do is preserve a surface parking lot now and could make speculation about what could happen with some very questionable money at some point in the future. Despite the opinion expressed here, the mixed-use library project is the result of thousands of hours of work and years of study and community input. There seems to be a lot of hangups about parking when all this measure does is preserve a parking lot. Well, thanks, Zach. And I take your point of view seriously. Well, let me say, first of all, that I think the community process around this issue never truly engaged with the idea that in order to get something good, you shouldn't do something bad, right? That the idea of a new library, a library for your kids and for other kids, and that's a great idea, right? And how to get that by making it a tenant in a city-owned parking garage, a 6-story parking garage, is a bad idea for a lot, for the reasons that have been spelled out over and time again, including to the Downtown Commission and Planning Commission, a joint meeting. I think it was before you were on the Downtown Commission. It was in October of 2015, where 3 consultants said, you don't want to build a new parking garage on purely financial reasons, not environmental reasons or anything else. You don't want to build a new parking garage for financial reasons, unless it's the last resort after you've done all these things first, which the city has not yet done. So I think we share a vision about the library, which is, which we think can be accomplished where it is right now in a renovation, spending not only the 27 million that was allocated by Measure S, but extra money. I agree with you. It's sort of iffy money from the downtown parking district, but at some point there may be money there to add to that Measure S money. The measure does a whole lot more than just preserve a parking lot for the farmer's market. It stops a garage. It requires the city to develop affordable housing on city-owned surface parking lots. That's not part of city policy right now. And you can imagine without our ballot initiative, when, if ever, the city would get around to developing affordable housing. The city's record in developing affordable housing is ever since the completion of the Tannery Arts Project in 2009, when people actually moved in, very, very little number of units have been built. It's mostly other, nonprofit developers that have developed housing. So this lights a fire under the city to actually make it city policy to make this happen. And I'm welcoming your response if you feel like speaking up.
You want to address Emily's question, Rick? She's obviously, coming pretty partisan. She's got one other question there. Do you want me to read it, or do you want to address it or not?
Why don't you read it?
Yeah. All I've heard here today is blatant disregard for the rigorous land use research and administrative efforts to secure funding and location for the highest impact project the city has ever pursued. Too bad.
Well, so blatant disregard for effort. I just got to say on a personal level, there was a proposal for a desalination plant that took $14 million worth of effort, like way more effort than this project has in it. But it was a bad idea. It was trying, again, it was aiming at a good goal, which was to have a reliable water source for people in Santa Cruz. But it was doing it in a way that was environmentally unsound. 12 times the energy used per gallon as our current water supply. So people oppose that. They get that, and they opposed it. And so it doesn't, just because a lot of hours have been put into something doesn't mean it's a good project. So Judy, you have your hand up? Oh, you know what? I said we were going to stop at 1. And John, did you want to?
Well, I know a lot of this has been about the nuts and bolts of parking and affordable housing in the library. I would like to make the case that public space is important to a community, and that Lot 4 is the future of public space in Santa Cruz, and that we have to look in the long term. We have the land for affordable housing that we can do on other parking lots, and we can make Lot 4 into a centerpiece of this community. And that seems to me, you have to look at New York City. What if they had said in the 19th century, oh, we can't afford to use the land for a park. We'll not have a central park. Where would we be today? Santa Cruz needs to have a vision of itself, it seems to me, that looks further ahead than 5 or 10 years from now and asks, what are we going to be proud to have after I'm gone and after others of us are gone? We're going to be proud to have a public space where people, with the increased density that we're going to get downtown, and we favor that density in the development, especially of affordable housing. We need a good public space for that. And I think that's important to say and to put at the centerpiece in relation to resolving other issues that the city has and has to face in a serious way. So, thank you.
Thank you for that, John. I think that rounds out what I wanted to say, very much so. I promised folks that we would end at 1, and here it is. And I appreciate the dialogue. Kind of wish we had had this kind of dialogue 5 years ago, but we tried. gotta say, a ballot measure is evidence that, the other process didn't work. And so here we are. So the voters will end up deciding this. So folks, tomorrow at 1 p.m. at Lot 4, the Farmers Market parking lot, we're doing our kickoff, so everybody's invited to that. And then let us know if you can help gather signatures. So it's the website is ourdowntown.ourfuture.org. So go on the website and let us know that you want to participate. And I'm going to say goodbye to everybody now, and glad to be living in the same community with you, even when we disagree.
Thank you.